Hey everyone, welcome back. So we are on to assembly for Gerald, which is going to take a minute. So for assembly, you are going to need black yarn, preferably medium weight, since your panels are made of medium weight yarn, but if you don't have medium weight, feel free to use whatever. And we also need pink yarn or red yarn for the blush. So I'm using pink yarn, you can use red yarn. And then we're also gonna need a yarn needle, which looks like this. It's got a pretty big hole at the top so the yarn can go through. There are some yarn needles that also have a curve at the end, but I have a straight yarn needle, so we are using that. And we are going to start off with the embroidery for the face for Gerald. So we are going to take your yarn and pass it through the eye of the yarn needle. Now it's a little difficult because as you can see, I'm having trouble because this yarn likes to split. So just make sure it's just kind of wiggle it around. You might have to cut it. I'm gonna actually cut this yarn to make sure I have a smooth, easy base to work with so it's not unraveling. So we're gonna put that in. There we go. Okay. Slip that through. Your needle is now on the yarn, as you can see. And we're gonna just do a little double knot. Make sure it stays on the needle. Just do a little double knot, There we go. Okay, we got our yarn. And we're gonna pull through a pretty good bit. So here is our panels that we're working with. We're working with the 6x6. So we're just going to take one 6x6 panel and we are going one stitch down. We're going one row down. So we are passing the needle through the one stitch down through that hole, and pulling up quite a bit of yarn. As you can see, that's a good bit of yarn we got here. And then we're going to go one diagonal, one stitch down, one row down, I should say, not stitch. We're gonna do that diagonally, pull it through. Okay, so now we have a little diagonal piece. We're gonna go to the other side, pull that up, and then diagonal that across, just like that. Okay. And there is we have a little XI now. We don't want Gerald to have a little XI. So, yeah, I just dropped my yarn needle. Ignore that. So we are gonna pass that needle back through where we originally put that diagonal. And then we are going to pass our needle under that stitch, under the X that we made. So this is a little difficult. Just pass it through one time and then pass it through the other side. We're gonna pull our yarn through and then we are going to do that multiple times. So we're gonna pass it through, I'd say at least 3 times. Okay. There's our 3rd time. So now you can see we kind of have a little bit of an eye going on here. And then we are going to pass it horizontally now. So pass that under that ball you just made. And this is going to make our eye, our horizontal pass. It's going to make our eye look all nice and smooth. Really, use your own discretion. I'm just going to do this once and then I am going to poke my needle in the top here and then pass it down into that stitch. And that is our first eye for Gerald that we embroidered, okay? And we're going to do that again. We're going to do it for the 2nd eye. So to finish this off, we are going to pass our needle through the back of those stitches and pass it all the way through. And And then we are going to not bring it all the way around. We're actually going to cut this yarn right here. We're going to cut this yarn from the stitch, and then we are going to pass it back through that big loop, and we're going to tie it off. And then we're just going to do another knot right there. So just make another knot, tie it tight, and then we are going to cut our yarn off of our yarn needle. Cut. Okay, and that is our first eye for Gerald. So awesome. Here's what it looks like. Very easy, very simple eye to make. I'm gonna leave that right there while we cut the yarn off of our yarn needle, and we are going to make the second eye now. So we're gonna pass the yarn through the yarn needle again. Once again, if it splits, that just happens, you know, with medium weight yarn. Especially acrylic. Acrylic is the worst for splitting. So we're just gonna cut that, give us a smooth base to work with, and attempt to pass that through the yarn needle again. It's a little difficult sometimes. Now you can also, if you don't want to cut your yarn and it's splitting, you can also lick like the end of the yarn, like you spit to make it into a nice straight line. People often do that with sewing, so it's easier to get the thread through the needle. I find it works also with yarn. So, you know, if you want to do that, absolutely feel free. I don't really like the feel of yarn in my mouth, so I don't often do that. Anyway, we are going to start with our next eye here. Okay, so we are going to go one stitch down, and pass that into our first stitch, and then we're going to go one stitch down diagonal. Okay, pass that through. Okay, and if your yarn gets a little tangled here, that is okay. That happens, you know. You see, I'm moving my stuff all about, you know. And we're gonna go the other way with that diagonal, pass it through. Okay, and then pass through the other side, make that diagonal. Okay, so now we have our X, and we are going to pass it through that first stitch that we did. So our yarn is on top. Pass your yarn needle under horizontally, and then wrap that, like I said, about 3 times. That's 2, and this is 3. Okay, and then we are going to go vertically as well. So go through the top, vertically, pass your yarn through. Do that one more time for this eye because he's looking a little bit wonky. So we're going to do that twice instead of once like we did for the last eye, just to try to make it look nice. And we're going to pass that through the middle here, that top middle part, pass it through, tie. Alright, so that is our second eye. Like I said, you guys are really going to see how bad I am at actually embroidering eyes, but I mean, you know, they look similar enough, and that's all that matters. So we're actually going to cut the yarn that's still attached to the ball here, and then kind of turn it over to the back, and we are going to pass it under those stitches that we just made. Pass it through, tie that off. My purple yarn did get caught in there, but that is okay. It'll come undone. And then we are just going to make a knot with the other yarn tail that we have here. Alright, pass that through and knot. And then do one more knot right there. And we are done. Those are the eyes for Gerald. We are going to cut that. Okay, so those are the eyes for Gerald, and now we have to do the blush for his face. So we are not using black yarn for the blush, obviously. So here are the eyes. Very nice looking Gerald, very nice. So for the blush, we are going to take this pink yarn right here. Very nice blushy color. We are going to, I believe this is not a medium weight yarn. I'm pretty sure this is a lightweight yarn. But if you have, I just didn't have pink and a medium weight, so we are going to use pink and a lightweight yarn, which, I mean, it'll come out exactly the same. Medium weight, lightweight, bulky, you know. You're just going to have to alter how many, like, pass-throughs you do for the horizontal part here. Alright, so we are going to go 1, 2 rows up and pass our needle through there. Okay, make sure you have enough yarn so you don't run out of yarn while you're doing this. Pass it through that diagonal. It's very similar to making the eyes, it's just a little bit different. And then go the stitch above that diagonal and pass it through the other diagonal here. Okay. Here we go. That's a little bit off, but it's okay. You know, it happens. And then we are going to do this horizontally. So we're going to pass it through the horizontals. And what I like to do for the blush, actually, so you can see it looks a little janky right now. It's just not to pull it so tight, so I actually go in on the other side under that diagonal, like in the middle of those diagonals, put my yarn in and then come out the other side in the middle of those diagonals and do that just once or twice, making sure your yarn is looser, you know. Does the blush have to look the nicest ever? No, just, I don't know. Make sure to not pull your yarn too tight here because you want it to be kind of loose on the blush. But that's the first blush. We're gonna cut the yarn that's still attached to the ball right here. Cut that yarn. And we are going to tie off. And I'm gonna pass it through these stitches here and then go through that loop and give it a good pull. Now once again, don't pull too tight because you want the yarn to be loose, and if you pull too tight the yarn will just look a little bit worse, so we're not going to do that. We're just going to kind of make some loose knots, and then on your double knot you can pull it a little bit tighter to make sure it stays. And that is the blush. As you can see, my voice is having a little bit of issues here. Let me clear my throat. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so that is the first blush. And now we are going to do the blush on the other side. And I'm gonna leave Gerald right here so you can see him. Admire him. Admire your work so far. No, you are doing this. This might be your first time doing this, and you are doing a great job, I'm sure. I'm very proud of you. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. Okay, we are going to pass our yarn through the needle, tie it off, do a double knot. I don't know why this double knot's taking me so long. Okay, do a double knot, pull some yarn out, and let's get started on the other cheek. So we are going to come up, right here in this stitch, and pull up our yarn, and then pass through the diagonal, one stitch over. Hope you can see that. Okay, and then pull through. That's a bit of a long diagonal, so I'm actually going to do that. Pass it back through. No big deal, no big deal. I'm actually going to start one over, so we're going to start here instead of where I was originally. So pass that through the diagonal. There we go. Now that's not as long, so that might look a little bit better here. Go one row up above that diagonal, and then pass it through the other diagonal. Okay. There we have our first X that we're doing. Like I said, make sure to keep your yarn a little bit loose while you're stitching this. Pass it up through that first diagonal we did, and now we're going to do some horizontal wraps. Make sure when you're doing your horizontal wraps to just keep it loose, keep the yarn loose, you know, don't pull it tight, because we just want the blush to be like more of an oval shape rather than a circle. And we're going to pass our yarn through the middle of those two diagonals. So do one stitch there, pull it down, and then come up between the middle of the other diagonals. And pull your yarn up, pull your stitch up, and then pass it back down on the other side. Okay, and now we have our blush. And we are going to cut the yarn that is still attached to the ball here. Cut that, snip, snip. And we are going to tie this off. And make sure not to tie it off too tight, like I said. You don't want to tie it off too tight, because otherwise your yarn will look very tight, and that is not how we want our blush to look. We want our blush to look loose and just kind of nice on there. Tying this off, finishing tying this off, and we are going to cut the yarn that is attached to the needle. Okay. Now we have Gerald's little face. You did it. You made his face. So, what do we do next? Well, we have to assemble Gerald. And to assemble Gerald, we are going to lay out our pieces on the little background here. So we are going to have the side pieces laid out, and that's the arm piece, hold on here, the front, back, and side pieces, okay? So here's our front. This is a side piece. This is another side piece. As you can see, we have a lot of yarn tails. This is another side piece. This is another side piece, and then we're going to move this down because we need the back. If I can find the back piece. Oh dear. And then we have the back piece. I did find the back piece. So this is how he is laid out. So we're gonna stitch these two, stitch the sides, and then stitch the bottom. And then once we do that, we are going to do the arms and legs and then stitch those on. So let's start with stitching the face to the bottom. So we're going to take our yarn tail that we have. We're actually going to turn this over so we have the longer yarn tail. And we're going to put that through our needle. Okay, tie that off. Tie. Do a double knot. And we are going to grab, we're going to move these pieces out of the way for now. Going to grab our front piece. We can see our side piece is connected. Grab our front piece and we're going to pass it through the first chain that we did. And pass that yarn needle through there. And now we see these two pieces are connected with a piece of yarn. So to stitch this up, we are going to go through the first loop here and then go through the other side. Okay, and then we're going to work like that all the way down the row. That is one. Okay. Then we go through again, pass through both sides, pull up a loop, pass through both sides, pass through both, 1 and 2. Done. I'm going to pass through our last side here and make sure those edges are flush, okay? Okay, and then we're going to pass through again like this. Sometimes your yarn gets stuck. And we're going to pass through that loop and pull it tight. Just like finishing off the ends, we are finishing off here. And we're going to cut that yarn, just like that. Now you're supposed to weave your ends back through, actually, but I don't do that because, I don't know, I'm lazy. I don't want to. So as you can see, we have Gerald's first side stitches, and he is going to sit on that bottom just like this. Okay, it's going to bend just like that. Now we need to do the side panel, so we're stitching up 2 sides here instead of just the one side. Okay, so let's get started on stitching that up. We are going to cut our yarn off of our, well actually I can untie this. So we're going to just untie this off of the yarn needle here, pull that off, and then we are going to use the longer tail that we have, so this tail right here, and pass that through the yarn needle. Maybe twist that end up just so it's easier to get through the yarn needle, like a little bit, and then pass it through. And we are going to do a double knot here. Once again, just do the double knot and it will not come undone off your yarn needle. So you probably will have to cut it off. Sometimes it comes loose when you're like sewing it up, but otherwise, you know. Yeah. Okay, and we are going to put this side to the front panel. Okay, we're sewing up the front panel first. So we are going to pass our yarn needle through the top stitch of the front panel and pull that all the way through. And now we have our two sides attached. So we are just gonna sew this up just like we did for the other one, passing through each side. I am trying to show you guys the best that I can, but it is a little hard to sew while also showing the camera. Okay. Pass it through both sides. Pass it through. Okay, and now we are on to the bottom. So we're going to see that those line up, and we're going to do a couple of stitches in this corner right here just to make sure none of that stuffing shows through. Just make sure it's nice and tight. There, we did our couple of stitches, and now we are going to move on to stitching the side. Now we're doing all the stitching the sides the same, so just pass your yarn through. As you can see, my yarn tail is not quite long enough for this. It might just make it, but we're running a little hard here. So make sure your yarn tails are long enough, or if you're not sure your yarn tail is long enough, just use a different piece of string. Just use a different piece of yarn and sew it up. As long as it's the same color as the other yarn that you're using, it's really not too big of a deal. Now my yarn is just going to make it here. And we are going to tie this off. We are actually going to cut this yarn off of here so we can tie it off a little bit easier. If I could untie it, I would, but I cannot. So we're going to cut it off of here, just like this. Okay. And then I'm gonna pass that back through the yarn needle, but not tie. We're not gonna tie it here, because it's a little bit too short to do much of anything. But we do need to be on there so we can pass it through. Okay, this is not gonna work, so we are going to use this yarn tail that we have at the end here, and we're actually just gonna tie it off and do a little double knot here. Now don't make my mistake. Don't have your yarn tails be too short. And we're gonna cut that. And now we have the front side and side, or bottom panel technically, and we are going to do the other side panel next. So we are going to take another one of these and do the next side panel here together. And I am actually going to take, since that yarn tail was too short for the stitching up part, I am actually just going to take a piece of yarn from the ball and attach that to my yarn needle. So if you're doing this, if you're getting another piece of yarn from the ball and then sewing it up that way, just make sure that you have enough slack from the yarn ball. Like, you have to pull it through quite a bit when you're beginning your stitch, because you need to make sure that you are going to have a long enough tail. Okay, so we are starting from the top stitch of the face, and then we are going to pull through like a lot of this yarn from the yarn ball. So like a lot of the yarn. And as you can see, I have these scraps on a little surface right here. Okay, so we are going to start stitching up. Passing our yarn through both sides. I do believe this is called a mattress stitch. So if you want a better tutorial on how to do a mattress stitch, you know, like I said, feel free to look up other videos, because I am probably not the best person at explaining all of this, but I am trying my best. So feel free to look up like a mattress stitch for crochet, because that will help you stitch up your works. But I think I kind of do my own version of a mattress stitch. I don't think I actually do the proper mattress stitch, but do whatever works for you. You know what I said. As long as it works for you, as long as your stuff looks nice, who cares? Do whatever works best. So we are just passing that through. I did make a very, very long bit of yarn, so I do have my other pieces, my other tails getting caught here, which is okay. You know, it happens. It's just a little bit annoying. Stitching up really is my least favorite part of crochet. It takes so long, for me at least. Maybe I'm just not good at sewing, but I don't know. It just always takes really long for me. And then we have our corner here, just about. So we're gonna make sure to stitch up that corner real tight, because we don't want any stuffing showing through at all. Okay. Make sure that corner is tight, tightly stitched, tightly stitched. Okay, got that corner stitched up, and we are going to fold that panel over, and now we have this panel that we are going to stitch up. So as you can see, Gerald is a little bit of a weird square here so far. We are going to do the back panel next, and then we are going to stuff him with polyfill or any other stuffing you have. I don't know, use plastic bags for all I care. Then your Gerald can have a weird little crinkly sound, and that could be enjoyable for some people. But otherwise use polyfill. We are just stitching up this last little bit here. As you can see, my yarn tail was long enough this time. Okay, we're not going to have any trouble with that. Ooh, that stitch was a little hard to get into. Feel free to take your time with sewing. Like I said, I know I take my time with sewing. I guess I'm just not very good at it. Or, I don't know. Okay. And we are going to tie that off. Hopefully. Our yarn needles getting stuck in between. So there we go, tie that off and just do another knot for good measure. Just in case. Now, always want to be safe than sorry, right? Do that knot and then cut the piece. Okay, so now we have 4 sides so far. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we are going to, as you can, my yarn tails are all over the place here. We are going to stitch up the back now. So it's very fun. Cut that piece off. That piece was still attached to the ball, and we're actually just going to tie this to the top piece because it's really easy. Okay. Tie that, do a little double knot here. And we're done. Okay. And I'm gonna actually cut some of these yarn tails shorter just because I am using the pulling from the ball method for the rest of these stitches here, I think. So just cut those off. Make sure to clean off your work area. You know, yarn tails can, all these scraps can get a little messy, a little bit tedious. And we are going to get started on the back here in just a second while I cut these pieces. Okay. So for the back, we need to find our back piece, which is this piece, 6x6. This is a 6x6. I hope. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's a 6x6. And then we are going to stitch up. Yeah, because this is 5x6. So we're gonna cut these pieces off. Make sure that knot is tight before you cut it. You can leave a little bit of a yarn tail just in case that makes you feel better. Move those out of the way, Okay, so now that we have our back piece, we are going to put our yarn through our needle. Okay. Double knot that. Then we are going to pass through this little corner right here. Any corner, it doesn't really matter which one. Just pick a corner. Since it's a 6x6 square, it is even. And then we are going to pass through the corner of that side panel. So we're starting on this corner to corner on the side panel. And we are just going to stitch all the way down. Alright, let's get a sewing. Pass through both sides. If you heard that, that was me hitting, I have a stuffed animal sitting next to me, and I knocked it with my hand and it hit the lamp. Stitching both sides. See, we have a really long yarn tail for this one because we are stitching 3 sides, not 2. So we need a bit of a long yarn tail, which is why I would recommend pulling from the ball for this one, just in case you didn't make a long enough yarn tail for when you cut your yarn. Which I often do. I kind of never make my yarn tails long enough. It's just a bad habit, I guess. But I don't really mind pulling from the ball to stitch. It's very easy, and I mean, what, it takes like 5 more seconds. Like, it's not a big deal. Anyway, we are just stitching this up as we go, as we go. We are almost at the corner here. so make sure you stitch up those corners really tight just to make sure we don't have any stuffing poking through, because we don't want any stuffing poking through. That is not very Gerald. You know what I'm saying? Probably not. That's okay. Have any of you guys ever seen The Good Place? You know how like Derek uses the expression like, oh, that's so Derek, or very Derek, you know? He uses his name as a adjective. I would like Gerald to be like Derek, where he just uses his name as an adjective. I think it'd be kind of funny. Anyway, we have stitch up the corner. Now we're gonna stitch up the bottom, and we're just gonna try to do this as quickly as possible here, because I am already tired of sewing. I do not like sewing. It is just not fun for me. And we're just gonna pull all that yarn through both sides. It really does take a while. We actually have 2 corners on this one, so just be aware of that when you are stitching up, that we have 2 corners and not just one. We're gonna tuck those little tails into the corner here. And they're both sides. Oh, the yarn gets all messed up. Sometimes I feel like a doctor, like when I'm stitching these things up, because you know, you're like doing really like long pulls with the yarn. I don't know, very silly, but you know, whatever makes it fun, I guess. Okay, do that corner really good, and then we are gonna look at the side here. Of the Gerald. And when yarn gets in the way. As you can see, these stitches are a little hard to get into sometimes. I'm not even sure why, other than maybe I just can't see, but I don't know. Sometimes they're hard for me to get into, so if you're having trouble, you know, it's okay. So we have our 4 sides now. We're going to tie off this yarn here in a minute. Just gonna tuck that all into, we're also gonna pull it through with the crochet hook, so actually I'm gonna do that right now. So we're gonna put our crochet hook into here and pull these little tails to the inside so we don't see them poking out of our work, because that's not nice. We don't like that. Okay, pull those two yarn tails in. Do the same on the other sides. Just pull them in. Make sure they're on the inside instead of the outside. We don't want them on the outside. These are all on the outside, so we're going to pull these yarn tails in. And now all of our yarn tails are on the inside. Oh, not quite. Got a couple on the bottom here. Okay, let's pull those in as well. There you go. And pull the other one in. Okay, that is all of our yarn tails pulled inside. So now we have to stuff Gerald. And I am going to get some polyfill to stuff him, and I will show you what that looks like in just a minute. Okay, so this is what our polyfill looks like, and we are just gonna tear some of this off and stuff it into the top of Gerald. Make him all stuffed, all nice and stuffed. Tear a little bit more. We don't want him to be overstuffed, but we want him to be like nicely stuffed. So just make sure all of that goes in there, and if it's popping out, like literally don't worry about it. We're about to put the top on, so we want him all nicely stuffed. Okay, he is stuffed and ready to be stitched up one final time. Now, once again, I am cutting the end of the yarn tails here and putting that aside, and we are going to stitch up Gerald one final time here. Other than the arms and legs, which we have to stitch up as well. So, I'm gonna take our yarn from our ball, move that polyfill out of the way, and put the yarn into the needle, double knot it. And then we're just gonna stitch up Gerald. Stitch up the sides of Gerald. So we are going to put it through a corner, put the needle through the corner, pull a lot of yarn through, and then put that needle into the other corner, and then we're just gonna start stitching them up. So pass the needle through on both sides. We're gonna do this hopefully fairly quickly, but just about reached a corner here. Corner, so now we're stitching up the top to the back panel. sure you're just going through both of these sides. Some people would say to stitch inside out. I normally do that, but for this project it really isn't too big of a deal. It's a very small plush, so honestly the stitching is secondary. This really is just a learning plush more than anything, so you saw that happen. And now we are going to stitch up the last part here, the face to the top panel. Okay. That stitch in there. Get that needle in there. I'm actually going to cut this off the ball right now because it's being annoying and it's getting caught. Okay, so just put that over there. Make sure it's all tight and continue stitching. Continue sewing up Gerald. As you get to the end of the stitch, if you realize, hey, I didn't put enough polyfill in Gerald, feel free to stuff him up more. I think I did put enough polyfill in him, so, you know, I am not going to do that. But if you feel the need to stuff him up more, definitely put some more stuffing in there before you finish sewing him up, because otherwise you can't put any more stuffing. And this is the last corner here. So we are just going to stitch that up real good. Make sure everything's all nice and tight here. And we are going to tie Gerald off. Our last tie off for at least the body of Gerald. Because we do still have to stitch up the arms, like I said. So that is actually going to be in another video. This is just going to be the assembly of the body video. I did do a triple knot there, by the way, not a double knot. And actually, I'm going to leave a slightly longer yarn tail here, and I am going to use my crochet hook to pull through the yarn. So we're just going to use our crochet hook and we're going to go through the bottom corner here and pull those two yarn tails through the middle of the body. And there we go. There's one. And we're going to pull the other one. Okay, so now Gerald is all stitched up in the body. You have your own little Gerald square here. And now we are going to make the arms and legs in a separate video. So I will see you in the last video in this series so we can finish making Gerald's arms and legs.